She hated all men, until the cowboy carried her into his bedroom and brought her back to life. Emma sat by the window of her small apartment, staring at the quiet street outside. The morning sun spilled across the worn wooden floor, but its warmth did little to touch the cold she felt inside. She sipped her coffee slowly, her mind wandering back to memories she wished she could erase. Men. She hated them all. Every single one had hurt her in some way. From boyfriends who broke promises to her own father who never seemed to understand her, Emma had learned that trusting a man only brought pain. It wasn't always like this. She remembered being young, full of hope and excitement. She had imagined a life filled with love and partnership, but life had other plans. One heartbreak after another, betrayal after betrayal, had left her cautious, bitter even. She had tried to let people in, had tried to believe in good intentions, but each time disappointment had followed. Now she kept her heart locked away, convinced that isolation was safer than risking it all again. Her apartment reflected her inner world. Everything was neat, orderly, and plain. She didn't decorate with bright colors or pictures of happy times because she didn't want reminders of what could go wrong. A small table by the window held a few books, a cup, and a plant that barely survived under her indifferent care. She liked things simple. Simple meant safe. The world outside her walls was loud, messy, and unpredictable. She preferred it quiet, predictable, and under her control. Emma's work gave her a small sense of purpose, though it never touched the part of her that longed for connection. She worked at a local library, cataloging books and helping visitors find what they needed. She liked the library because it was calm, structured, and full of knowledge. People came and went, but she could remain detached, helping them without letting herself get involved. Smiling politely, answering questions, returning to her desk, it was enough. It gave her the illusion of human contact without the risk of real intimacy. Outside the library window, she often watched people walk by. Couples holding hands, laughing, sharing moments that Emma thought she would never have again. She felt a pang of longing, quickly followed by resentment. "Why should they have it?" she would whisper to herself. "Why should anyone get what I can't?" The anger and hurt had become a shield, one she clung to fiercely. It was easier to hate than to hope, easier to be bitter than to be disappointed again. Even her friends had stopped trying to push past her walls. They had reached out at first, inviting her to dinners, coffee, and small get-togethers, but Emma always found excuses. "I'm busy," she would say. "I have work," or "I need some rest." Deep down, she knew it wasn't about being busy, it was about protecting herself. Every invitation felt like a test she wasn't ready to pass. The fear of vulnerability had become a daily companion, one she carried with quiet determination. Emma's family life had been another reason she built her walls. Her father had always been distant, working long hours and never quite understanding her. Her mother had tried, but she was too overwhelmed with her own life to guide Emma through the storms. And the men in her past, they had left marks, some emotional, some lasting in ways she couldn't forget. Each failure in love added a brick to the wall she had built around her heart, until the fortress became almost impenetrable. One rainy afternoon, Emma walked home from the library, her umbrella barely keeping her dry. The streets were slick with rain, and the sky was a dull gray that matched her mood. She liked rain sometimes when it was quiet, when it gave her a reason to stay inside and avoid people. But today, the rain felt heavy, as if the world itself was pressing down on her. She pulled her coat tighter around her, wishing she could pull herself tighter around her emotions too. As she reached her apartment, she noticed a small commotion across the street. A man was struggling to push a broken-down cart full of supplies. People were walking past without stopping. Normally, Emma would have kept walking, pretending not to see. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the sheer effort on the man's face, the way he gritted his teeth and refused to give up. For a brief moment, Emma felt a flicker of curiosity, quickly buried under the familiar walls of her skepticism. She went inside, shutting the door with a soft click. The apartment felt empty, but in a comforting way. There was no chaos, no unpredictability, no pain, just her, and the small sanctuary she had created. She brewed another cup of coffee, sitting down to reflect on her day. It had been like any other, quiet, controlled, safe. She told herself she was fine, she was safe. And in her safety there was no need for men, no need for love, no need for anything that could disturb the fragile peace she had fought so hard to build. Yet, deep down, Emma could feel something stirring, even if she didn't want to admit it. It was a small, almost imperceptible feeling, like a distant echo of the life she used to imagine for herself. She pushed it away, forcing her thoughts back to her books, her plants, and her routines. But it lingered quietly like a shadow that wouldn't leave, hinting that maybe, just maybe, life had more to offer than hurt and betrayal. For now, she buried that thought and sipped her coffee, letting the warmth seep into her hands, if not into her heart. Outside, the world continued to move, noisy and unpredictable as always. And Emma stayed in her quiet corner, safe behind the walls she had built, unaware that soon everything was about to change. The next morning, Emma followed her usual routine. She woke early, made her coffee, and walked to the library, keeping her thoughts tightly controlled. Life, she reminded herself, was predictable and safe. She liked it that way. She had no need for surprises, especially from men. But that morning, something unexpected happened. As she walked past the small general store on the edge of town, she noticed a man struggling with a heavy load of supplies near the parking lot. The cart was overloaded, and the wheels seemed about to give way. People were walking past him, ignoring the difficulty. Emma instinctively looked away, telling herself it wasn't her problem. Yet something made her glance back. The man, tall, broad-shouldered, with suntanned skin and worn clothes, was clearly struggling. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his hands were red from gripping the wooden handles. His face was determined but kind, and his eyes held a quiet patience. For some reason, Emma felt a flicker of curiosity. She had never felt drawn to a stranger like this, and it made her uneasy. She walked closer, still hesitant. "Do you need some help?" she asked quietly, her voice almost trembling. The man looked up, surprised. His eyes softened when they met hers. "Oh, would you? That would help a lot, thank you." Together they lifted the cart, moving it slowly toward the edge of the store. Emma felt the strain in her arms and back but kept going. There was a strange sense of satisfaction in helping, though she didn't want to admit it. "I'm Luke," the man said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Thanks again. That cart can be tricky." She didn't smile, didn't offer more than the bare minimum. Luke seemed to notice her hesitation but didn't push. Instead, he started talking casually about the weather, the town, and the difficulty of moving heavy loads on rainy days. His voice was steady, comforting even. Emma found herself listening, though she kept her distance emotionally. She didn't want to like him. She didn't want to trust a man again. After a few minutes, the cart was safely inside the store. Emma stepped back, brushing dust from her coat. "There," she said, "it's done." Most people would just walk by. He seemed to be around the same store, helping people, working with animals on his small farm, and generally making life a little easier for everyone he met. People smiled when they saw him, and even from a distance, Emma could feel the difference he made. He wasn't loud or showy, but his presence had a calm, steady influence that seemed to make the town lighter, warmer. Emma tried to ignore him, telling herself she didn't care, that men like him didn't change anything. But every time she saw him, a small part of her resisted the walls she had built. There was something different about Luke. He didn't seem to demand attention or affection, yet he had a way of drawing it out of people without even trying. One afternoon, a strong wind blew across the town, rattling the windows and tossing papers in the street. Emma was walking home from the library when she saw Luke again, struggling to secure a small shed on his property. The roof flapped dangerously, and a loose board threatened to fly into the road. Emma hesitated, then walked over. "Do you need help?" she asked again, her voice firmer this time. Luke looked at her and nodded. "Yes, please. This wind is stronger than I expected." Emma realized she hadn't felt this relaxed around a man in years. After the work was done, Luke wiped his hands on a rag and turned to her. "Thanks, Emma. I don't know what I would have done without your help." Over the next few weeks, Emma and Luke kept running into each other. Sometimes it was at the store, sometimes helping neighbors, sometimes at town events. Each encounter was brief but meaningful. Luke never rushed her, never pushed her boundaries. He was patient, kind, and consistent. Emma found herself looking forward to these moments, though she didn't admit it even to herself. One day, Emma's routine was interrupted by a sudden accident. She was walking home carrying groceries when she tripped on a loose sidewalk stone and twisted her ankle badly. Pain shot through her leg and she couldn't stand. She sat on the curb, trying not to cry, when she saw Luke approaching from the street. "Emma, are you okay?" he asked, rushing to her side. I think I hurt my ankle," she said, her voice strained. Without hesitation, Luke gently helped her to her feet, supporting her weight. He carried her the rest of the way to her apartment, careful and steady. Emma felt an unusual mix of vulnerability and trust. She had never let a man help her like this before. The experience was strange but also strangely comforting. Once inside her apartment, Luke helped her sit on the couch and removed her shoes carefully. He examined her ankle. "It's swollen, but I don't think it's broken. You need to rest and keep it elevated. I'll come by tomorrow to check on you. You shouldn't be alone right now." She couldn't deny it. There was something different about him. He didn't seem interested in control or power, in asking for anything in return. He just cared. And for the first time in a long while, Emma allowed herself to imagine a life where she could trust again, even if only a little. The days passed and Luke kept his promise. He visited her, bringing small meals, helping with chores, and simply keeping her company. They talked about simple things, books, town life, animals, but Emma found herself opening up slowly. She shared little details about her past, things she had never told anyone. And Luke listened. Not with judgment, not with advice, but with understanding. Emma realized that his patience and kindness were breaking down her walls, brick by brick. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She hated how much she needed his presence, yet she couldn't deny it. He was slowly becoming more than just a friendly neighbor. By the time her ankle healed, Emma felt different. She was still cautious, still wary of men, but she had begun to see that not all men were the same. Some, like Luke, could be patient, kind, and genuine. He had entered her life quietly, without drama, without force, and yet he was making a bigger impact than anyone else ever had. Emma still didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could ever fully let go of her fear and hatred. But for the first time in years, she felt hope. And that hope, fragile as it was, made the walls around her heart feel a little less heavy, a little less unbreakable. She had met Luke by chance, and he had done nothing extraordinary, just been present, just cared. But for Emma, that was enough. Enough to make her question everything she had believed about men, love, and herself. And in that quiet, uncertain way, a new story was beginning, one that promised healing, trust, and perhaps, someday, love. Emma had begun to notice subtle changes in herself. It was strange, almost frightening. She realized that she looked forward to seeing Luke, that her thoughts often wandered to him during quiet moments at the library or at home. She didn't want to admit it to herself, because admitting it meant vulnerability, and vulnerability was dangerous. She had spent so long hiding behind walls of anger and mistrust, and now those walls were slowly crumbling. It was a chilly afternoon when the real test of her trust came. Emma had planned to spend the day at home, tidying her apartment and reading, as usual. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A sudden storm rolled in, with heavy rain and strong winds that rattled her windows. The electricity flickered and then went out completely. Alone, in the dark, Emma felt a wave of panic. She had always prided herself on being self-reliant, but the situation reminded her how fragile she truly was when she faced the world alone. As the rain pounded against her windows, there was a knock on the door. Emma froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her heart raced. The first thought that came to her mind was that it might be someone trying to take advantage of her. She hesitated, unsure whether to open it. "Emma, it's me, Luke," came a familiar, calm voice. "I noticed the storm. I thought you might need some help." He stepped inside, shaking off his coat, and immediately went to light some candles around the apartment. Their warm glow filled the room, making the space feel cozy and safe despite the storm raging outside. Luke moved with quiet confidence, placing a blanket over her shoulders and guiding her to sit on the couch. "You don't have to face this alone," he said simply. Emma wanted to argue, to insist she was fine alone, but the exhaustion, both physical and emotional, made her silent. She let him help, let him care for her without questioning his intentions. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable without shame. Luke sat beside her, not too close, but close enough to offer comfort. He handed her a cup of warm tea he had prepared. The warmth spread through her hands and slowly into her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Luke didn't reply with words that demanded anything from her. He just smiled and nodded, allowing her to find her own way back to calm. The storm continued outside, but inside, Emma felt something shift. The fear and mistrust she had carried for so long seemed to lose some of their power. She realized she didn't have to face life alone, that someone could care for her without expecting anything in return. Over the next few hours, they talked quietly about simple things: the storm, the town, memories of childhood, and the small joys of life. Emma found herself laughing softly at a story Luke told about a stubborn goat he had to chase down on his farm. The sound of her own laughter startled her, but it also made her heart feel lighter. She had forgotten what it felt like to truly enjoy someone's company without worry. Luke noticed her change in mood but didn't push her to explain. He simply sat there, offering companionship and warmth. For Emma, it was more than she had expected from any man in years. She had never experienced this combination of patience, understanding, and gentle care. It was confusing, but it felt right in a way she hadn't felt for a long time. As the evening grew late, the storm finally began to subside. Luke helped her move to her bedroom so she could rest comfortably. He adjusted her blankets and made sure she had everything she needed. There was no pressure, no expectation, just care. Emma lay back, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and relief. She had never let anyone into her personal space like this, and yet she felt safe. Before leaving, Luke knelt beside her bed and said softly, "You don't have to be afraid to let people in, Emma. Not everyone is going to hurt you." She realized that he wasn't just a friendly neighbor or a helpful acquaintance. He was someone she could trust, someone who respected her boundaries while gently encouraging her to open her heart again. For the next few days, Emma noticed a subtle shift in her own behavior. She allowed herself to smile more easily, to laugh at small things, and even to daydream about the future. She began to see life as more than a series of disappointments and betrayals. Luke had not forced this change. It had grown naturally, quietly, through his consistent kindness and patience. One morning, Emma received a call from a friend inviting her to a small-town gathering. Normally, she would have declined immediately, citing busyness or fatigue. But this time, she found herself hesitating. She thought about Luke and how he had shown her that it was possible to trust someone without fear. She realized that maybe she was ready to take a small step back into the world. When she arrived at the gathering, Luke was there, tending to some animals nearby. Their eyes met across the yard, and he smiled warmly at her. Emma felt a flutter in her chest but didn't look away. She approached him and they spent the day talking and helping with small tasks. There was no pressure, no rushing, just companionship and shared experiences. For Emma, it was a revelation. Life could be simple, kind, and enjoyable, even with someone else present. That evening, as she walked home, Emma reflected on the changes she had felt. She realized that Luke had done something extraordinary, not through grand gestures, but through quiet, consistent care. He had shown her that it was possible to trust again, to feel safe, and even to enjoy the presence of a man without fear. Her hatred, while still present, had begun to soften. She could see now that not all men were the same, and that sometimes patience and kindness could be more powerful than anything else. The next few weeks strengthened their bond even more. Luke would visit occasionally, bringing small gifts from his farm, fresh vegetables, eggs, or a bouquet of wildflowers. Emma started to look forward to these moments, appreciating the thoughtfulness and care behind each gesture. She felt seen, valued, and cared for, in a way she had never experienced before. One evening, as they sat on her couch sharing a quiet moment, Emma realized she had begun to let down her guard almost entirely. She was laughing, talking, and even sharing some of her past fears and experiences with Luke. For the first time, she felt a deep connection, a sense of understanding and safety she had never known. Luke listened patiently, never judging, never pushing. His quiet presence allowed her to explore her feelings without fear. And slowly, Emma understood something profound. Trust could be rebuilt, and love could grow again, even after years of pain. By the time the storm that had first brought them closer was long gone, Emma felt transformed. She was still cautious, still aware of the potential for hurt, but she had learned that kindness, patience, and understanding could break through even the thickest walls. Luke had carried her not just through physical challenges, but through emotional ones as well. He had shown her that it was possible to feel safe again, to let someone care for her without losing herself. Emma still didn't know what the future held. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully open her heart, but for the first time in years, she felt hope. And hope, fragile and quiet as it was, made her feel alive again. She had begun to see life differently, to understand that one person's presence and care could make a lasting impact. Luke had brought a sense of warmth and trust back into her world, and she was beginning to realize that perhaps, just perhaps, she could allow herself to feel again. The story of Emma and Luke was far from over, but part 3 marked a turning point. The walls she had built so carefully were showing cracks, not from force or demand, but from genuine, patient love. Emma had begun to understand that healing was possible, and that sometimes life's most meaningful connections came from the simplest acts of care. And for Emma, that simple, quiet care had begun to change everything. After the storm and the quiet moments she had shared with Luke, Emma began to notice life differently. Even the small routines she had once relied on felt brighter. She no longer viewed her days as monotonous or lonely. There was a subtle excitement, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Every small detail seemed more meaningful. The sound of birds outside her window, the warmth of her morning coffee, and the gentle presence of someone who cared about her well-being. Luke continued to visit, though he never pressured her. Sometimes he came with small gifts from his farm, fresh eggs, a loaf of bread he had baked himself, or bouquets of wildflowers he picked along the fields. These gestures were simple, yet they touched Emma deeply. Each one reminded her that someone could care about her without wanting anything in return. She began to realize that life could be gentle and supportive, even after years of disappointment and pain. One afternoon, Luke suggested they take a short walk together in the countryside. At first, Emma hesitated. Being outside, away from the comfort of her routines, made her anxious. But Luke's calm voice and reassuring smile gave her courage. "Just a little walk," he said softly. "No pressure. We'll take it slow." The sun was warm, the sky clear, and the air smelled of fresh earth and rain from earlier storms. As they walked, they talked about simple things: the birds they saw, the clouds drifting above, and the animals that occasionally crossed their path. There was no rush, no expectation, just a slow, quiet companionship. For Emma, this was transformative. She realized that she could enjoy someone's company without fear. She could laugh, share her thoughts, and even make jokes without worrying about being judged or hurt. Luke's presence gave her a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. She began to see that life could be enjoyable again, that it didn't have to be defined by her past disappointments. During one of these walks, Emma tripped slightly on a tree root and Luke reached out to steady her. Their hands brushed, and for a moment Emma felt a spark of warmth that made her heart race. She pulled back quickly, feeling embarrassed, but Luke only smiled gently. "It's okay," he said. "No harm done. I'm just glad you're safe." She realized that trust was not something that had to be given all at once. It could be built gradually, through small, consistent acts of care. Luke had been patient, allowing her to move at her own pace, and that patience had allowed her to feel safe enough to let her guard down just a little. Back at her apartment, Emma started to take more interest in things she had neglected. She cleaned her home more thoroughly, tended to her plants, and even cooked simple meals for herself. Life felt fuller, more meaningful. She found herself humming softly while working, a sound she hadn't made in years. It was a sign, she realized, that joy could return, even in small doses, and that it didn't have to be feared. Luke encouraged these small steps without making them feel forced. Sometimes he would stop by to help with a minor chore, like fixing a leaky faucet or organizing a shelf. Sometimes he would just sit with her, reading quietly or sharing a story from his day on the farm. Emma began to see that life didn't have to be lived in isolation. It could be shared, gently, with someone who respected her boundaries. One day, Luke suggested helping him with a small project on his farm. Emma was hesitant at first. She had no experience with farm work, and the thought of being outside in the sun all day was daunting. But Luke's gentle encouragement made her try. They spent the day planting flowers, feeding animals, and tending to the land. It was hard work, and Emma felt tired, but she also felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. By the time they finished, Emma was covered in dirt and sweat, but she was smiling genuinely. Luke handed her a cold drink and wiped the sweat from his own brow. "You did great," he said simply. "I'm proud of you." It wasn't just about the work. It was about being seen, recognized, and appreciated. Luke had shown her that small efforts, kindness, and patience could rebuild confidence. And slowly, Emma began to believe in herself again. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened naturally. They shared meals, walked in the fields, and spent quiet evenings talking about everything from childhood memories to hopes for the future. Emma felt safe opening up about her past, sharing fears and experiences she had kept hidden for years. And Luke listened, never judging, never pushing, just offering understanding and support. Emma began to notice other changes in herself as well. She smiled more freely, laughed more often, and even started to plan small outings on her own. The world no longer seemed as overwhelming or threatening. Luke's influence had been subtle but profound, reminding her that life could be kind, that people could be trustworthy, and that healing was possible. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat on a hill overlooking the town. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She realized that she had come to trust Luke not just as a friend, but as someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For being patient, for caring, for showing me that life can be gentle again." She realized that trust, kindness, and patience could heal even the deepest wounds, and she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to love again. As the days went by, Emma became more engaged with the world around her. She visited friends, attended town events, and even helped with small community projects. Each experience built her confidence and sense of belonging. She discovered that life didn't have to be lonely, and that sharing it with someone who cared could make it even more meaningful. Luke remained a steady presence in her life, never demanding more than she could give, never rushing her. His patience taught her that true care was about consistency, respect, and understanding. And as Emma grew stronger, both emotionally and socially, she began to envision a future that included hope, trust, and even love. By the end of part 4, Emma had transformed in ways she hadn't thought possible. She was no longer defined by fear, anger, or resentment. She had learned to embrace life again, to trust slowly, and to accept kindness without suspicion. Luke had not only helped her rediscover joy, but he had also shown her that meaningful relationships were built on patience, respect, and shared experiences. Emma's journey was far from over, but she now understood that healing was possible and that love could return in quiet, gentle ways. She had begun to see life as full of possibilities, with someone by her side who respected, cared, and believed in her. And for the first time in a long time, she felt alive, hopeful, and ready to embrace whatever the future might bring. Emma had come a long way since the days when she felt the world was against her. The walls she had built around her heart, brick by brick, over years of disappointment and hurt, were finally showing signs of crumbling. It had not happened quickly, nor had it happened because of grand gestures. Instead, it had happened through quiet, consistent care, gentle patience, and unwavering kindness. Luke had become a part of her life in ways she could not have imagined, and slowly she was learning to trust again. It was a warm morning when Emma realized just how much she had changed. The sun streamed into her apartment, lighting up the small corners she had once ignored. She looked around at her tidy space, her thriving plants, and the small personal touches she had added over the weeks. Everything seemed alive and vibrant, reflecting the new energy she felt inside. Emma took a deep breath, feeling a sense of gratitude that was foreign yet comforting. Luke knocked on the door as he often did, carrying a basket of fresh produce from his farm. His presence had become a comforting constant in her life. "Good morning," he said warmly, setting the basket down. "I thought you might like some fresh vegetables for the week." Emma realized that she no longer felt anxious in his presence. She could talk, laugh, and even sit in silence with him without feeling tense or on guard. Over the next few days, Emma found herself reflecting on her journey. She remembered the long years of mistrust, the heartbreak, and the isolation she had imposed on herself. And now she saw how much had changed. Luke had helped her rediscover joy, trust, and hope, not through force, but through patience and gentle care. One afternoon, Luke suggested they go for a ride on his old truck, something he often did to check on the animals and fields around the town. Emma hesitated at first. Being outside, exposed to unpredictability, had once been frightening. But now she felt a quiet courage she hadn't known before. "I'd like that," she said softly. The ride was peaceful. The countryside stretched out around them, golden fields swaying in the breeze, animals grazing quietly, and the distant hills catching the sunlight. Luke drove carefully, speaking occasionally about the farm and the animals, but mostly letting the quiet fill the space. Emma found herself relaxing completely, feeling connected to the world and to the moment. They stopped at a small hill overlooking the valley. The view was breathtaking. Emma took a deep breath, feeling a sense of freedom she had never experienced. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Luke smiled. "It is, and it's even better when shared." She had spent years believing that sharing life, emotions, or trust with someone could only lead to pain. But here she was, feeling safe, appreciated, and even joyful in Luke's presence. She realized that life could be shared without fear, that connection could be healing, and that love could exist without hurt. Over time, their relationship deepened naturally. They spent evenings cooking together, tending to animals and walking through fields and forests. Emma learned small skills from Luke: how to care for animals, how to plant and harvest, and how to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. These lessons were more than practical. They were lessons in trust, patience, and cooperation. Emma felt herself growing stronger and more confident with each passing day. One evening, after a long day of work on the farm, they sat together under the stars. The sky was clear, the air cool, and the night filled with the sounds of crickets and distant owls. Emma leaned against Luke, feeling safe, calm, and content. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel fully, without fear of judgment or betrayal. "Luke," she said quietly, "I never thought I could feel like this again. Safe, happy, cared for." Emma realized that Luke had not only helped her rebuild trust in men but also in herself. She had learned to be vulnerable, to accept care, and to enjoy life again. Her past pain had not vanished, but it no longer defined her. She was free to live, to trust, and even to love. Over the next few weeks, Emma noticed a change in herself that surprised her. She laughed more easily, smiled more often, and felt a sense of energy and purpose she had long thought lost. She began helping neighbors, volunteering in small ways, and even rekindling friendships she had neglected. Her life was fuller, richer, and more connected. Luke remained a steady presence, never demanding more than she could give, never rushing her. His patience and understanding taught Emma that true care is consistent, gentle, and respectful. She began to understand that meaningful relationships were built on shared experiences, trust, and kindness, not on grand gestures or dramatic declarations. One afternoon, Emma was helping Luke repair a fence on the farm. The sun was warm and the work was hard, but she felt a sense of satisfaction she hadn't experienced in years. As they worked side by side, she realized just how far she had come. She no longer feared disappointment or betrayal. Instead, she felt confident, capable, and even excited about the future. After finishing the fence, they sat together on a large rock overlooking the fields. Emma leaned her head on Luke's shoulder, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I never thought I could trust anyone again," she said softly, "but you've shown me that it's possible, that life can be kind." Emma realized that healing was a journey, not a single event. Luke's presence had guided her gently, but it was her own courage, patience, and willingness to trust that had brought her to this point. She had reclaimed her life, her confidence, and her ability to feel joy and love. As the days turned into weeks, Emma fully embraced the changes in her life. She continued to spend time with Luke, helping him on the farm, exploring the countryside, and sharing quiet moments together. She had learned to appreciate the small things, the simple joys, and the people who truly cared about her well-being. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the hills, Emma reflected on her journey. She had started as a woman closed off, bitter, and hurt. She had built walls to protect herself from the world and from men who had caused her pain. But now, those walls had crumbled, replaced by trust, hope, and the possibility of love. She looked at Luke, feeling a warmth in her chest that was both comforting and exhilarating. He had not only shown her that life could be kind again, but had also helped her see her own strength, resilience, and capacity for joy. "I'm ready," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I'm ready to live fully, to trust, and to love again. And I always will be." From that day forward, Emma and Luke continued to build their life together, step by step, day by day. They celebrated small victories, shared quiet moments, and faced challenges with patience and understanding. Emma had rediscovered herself, her strength, and her ability to trust. She had learned that life could be gentle, kind, and full of joy. And in Luke, she had found not just a companion, but a partner who had brought her back to life, emotionally, spiritually, and fully. Emma's story was no longer one of fear, bitterness, or isolation. It was a story of healing, trust, and love. She had learned that even after years of pain, it was possible to open her heart, embrace life, and experience the joy of connection. And for Emma, that was the greatest gift of all: a life renewed, a heart restored, and a future filled with hope.